Since the formation of the Republic of Kenya in 1963, the country has experienced a tremendous change in its spheres of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. An organization that has found itself in these changes is a Kenyan chapter of the International Commission of Jurists, ICJ. In recent years, ICJ-Kenya emerged as a leading organization with a special niche in advocacy in human rights and governance issues.
Hiyo wimbo inatakikana kuambia serikali ya kwamba isiendelee kushika wananchi wa mteja, si ndio?
Our programs are aimed at assisting, for example, the judiciary program, assisting the judiciary to address some of the challenges that it is facing. So we partner very closely with the judiciary to ensure that access to justice issues are addressed.
The greatest impetus came in the aftermath of the large-scale violence that broke out in 2007 following disputed presidential elections. This was predicated by the clamor for multipartism in the late 80s, where ICJ-Kenya was instrumental in efforts to bring lasting political stability to Kenya.
2007 is actually seen as a place where, a lot of shenanigans took place, but Kenya seems to have moved on, and we actually have been, if you look at the recent messaging, it has been that we are right now, yet we have not gotten anywhere near accountability. And for me, it is sad in the sense that there's been amnesia, but that is a struggle, and that for me is apart outside the space that we've opened. The second value we're adding is we're adding a discourse that contextualizes properly what is going on in the country.
Following the resolution of the 2007 crisis led by the chair of African Eminent Personalities, Dr. Kofi Annan, ICJ's role emerged to be twofold: enactment of the Peace and Reconciliation Accord of 2008 and implementation of Agenda 4, which still continues to touch on issues of rule of law and governance. In great anticipation by ICJ-Kenya is the possibility of the International Criminal Court, ICC, to indict the chief perpetrators of the 2007-2008 post-election violence proceeding according to plan. This will make the country engage with the court for a number of years, and support of the ICC in Kenya and in the regional bloc is part of the agenda of ICJ-Kenya.
This is a new area for this country especially, but also for this region. The Rome Statute, which is the basis of international criminal justice, is a relatively new development. So there has not been sufficient civil society expertise or leadership to join the discourse around how to relate with the Rome Statute.
The mediation of Kenya's political crisis gave impetus to demands for the enactment of a new constitution. This two-decade struggle was finally brought to a close on 27th August 2010, with its historic promulgation witnessed the world over.
His Excellency the President, having read the instruments of promulgation of the new Constitution, now moves so that he can be able to sign the instruments of promulgation.
ICJ-Kenya has been closely involved in electoral reforms in the country.
They have come to help us in drafting two bills which are very crucial for electoral reforms. One is the Electoral Commission Bill, which I think ICJ on 3 occasions sent their people to come and join us in a workshop together with Parliament, Judiciary, in trying to draft a bill to cater for the new electoral commission.
Not a single law has passed through my committee without the input of the ICJ. And I should add that every single law that goes to Parliament passes through my committee. For any piece of legislation to be enacted, it has to be processed through my committee. Is basically the gatekeeper for legislation. So I'm talking about a lot of legislation, and all that volume of legislation has received very high quality technical input from the ICJ.
Over the years, ICJ-Kenya has established a strong and active board with appropriate skills to lead the growth of the organization. The board is currently chaired by Mr. Albert Kamunde.
The council is very vital in relation to the success of ICJ because it is mandated to give guidance to the executive director who is in charge of day-to-day running of the organization. So
ICJ-Kenya has developed and institutionalized clear and effective management policies and procedures that guide organizational operations. Its strong leadership and management structures contribute to a strong performance culture in the organization. Its secretariat is headed by Mr. George Kegoro.
We've got a secretariat, professionalized secretariat, largely made up of lawyers, but there are other capacities like we run a fairly good financial system. We've been recognized in contemporary civil society competitions for excellence in various performance areas. Our financial systems are regarded as some of the best in our sector.
The principal means of delivering civil and criminal justice is through the formal courts of law. Access to justice in Kenya, though, is hindered primarily by numbers. There are 332 judges and magistrates serving more than 38 million people, yet the maximum number of judges and magistrates prescribed by law have not been attained.
Why are we not, for instance, employing 25 High Court judges? We have the vacancies. Do you know why? I believe it is because most practitioners who would be appropriate are not willing to surrender their private practice to come and serve, because what changes?
For efficiency, ICJ-Kenya is advocating for an increase in the number of arbitrators to bring it within the margin of maximum number prescribed by law.
Looking around the judiciary being a very key arm of government and having for the long time being supplanted by essentially the executive, but also the legislature in terms of its place on the table. If we don't get that right, if Kenyans have nowhere to run to whenever they have a problem, and it's not just a place to run to, but a place they can trust, we get again into a situation where when the stakes are high, as happened in 2007, one group would say, we're not going there, and look what happens next. Then we get into the kind of violence and the kind of mayhem that we saw then. So
ICJ-Kenya has played a key role in engaging the judiciary and other stakeholders to lobby for judicial reforms.
We cannot lobby. ICJ can, and it does very well. And this is why we enjoy working with them, because there are times where we suggest things in our decisions, but the Attorney General doesn't pick it up. If ICJ picks it up and makes the case for us and lobbies Parliament, we are going to go far working together.
ICJ-Kenya has published numerous reports and other informative articles on the judiciary, judicial reform, and administration of justice in Kenya.
In particular, there is a book that had been written by Mr. Antonio, and in collaboration with ICJ, he has been here with us, and we've actually looked at the book, the way that they have interviewed us on witness protection, and the experience has been very rich and fruitful and very, very, very educative to us.
ICJ-Kenya has a large paralegal network which it uses to sensitize the public about legal concepts, the law, and how they can access justice.
The idea is, if the country has got about 5,000 lawyers, mostly based in Nairobi, it means that rural people, who are the majority of Kenyans, do not have access to legal advice, quality legal advice. Now, to deal with that problem, we have been engaged in trying to propagate basic legal literacy among a cadre of grassroots leaders who then become paralegals.
The Laikipia Legal Forum is one of such paralegal networks.
This is the headquarters of the forum. It was a product of International Commission of Jurists. They trained the paralegals we have talked about 100, and we have the headquarters here in Kenaba.
The Kitui Legal Forum is yet another paralegal network serving the eastern region of Kenya.
Mimi ni mmoja katika wale waanzilishi wa project hii mwaka wa 1997. Na jinsi ninavyoona ilitusaidia sana.
Provincial administration officials, including district officers, chiefs, as well as senior police officers, have benefited from the role the local legal forums have played in improving access to justice.
They've been able to train my village elders, and that's why you can see on my desk I have some books. All my village elders know of children's rights, and these books have been brought to me by the Laikipia Legal Forum. So when they arbitrate disputes in the villages, now they arbitrate from a point of knowledge.
We encourage Laikipia Legal Forum to partner with the police, especially on issues to do with education. We encourage that close relationship between the public and the police, because members of public are the major stakeholders actually in security issues.
Many ordinary members of the communities have immensely benefited from the intervention done by the paralegal officers.
Hii imenisaidia wakati nilipata kesi na watu wangu wa nyumbani. Niliwahi kuingia kwa hiyo ofisi nikiwajulisha hii maneno ya kudhulumiwa na watu wangu wa nyumbani na wakanisaidia.
Kuna wakati nilikuwa na shida nyumbani, nikaita Christine, lakini siku anajua, alikuja tu na alikuwa rafiki ya mzee yangu, akakuja akaniambia amekuja kama ofisi, tukaongea na tukamaliza, nikaona nimesaidika na ndio tuliongea na hii ikamalizika.
Treat we can cancel, because sometimes you find somebody, the brother or sister, they are in quarrel, and the issue you find it in court is very hard. So they can listen, they can care, and we can have a solution. So I say God is good. May God bless the parallel legal project and expand it.
In recognition of great service to the community, ICJ-Kenya has been awarding deserving Kenyans the prestigious Jurist of the Year award.
In naming Marende as the Jurist of the Year, the Committee of Jurists noted Marende's epic ruling early in the year when Parliament...
I must say that I was really privileged to be given that award, because that award, so to speak, came from a professional organization that has everything to do with the law, the rule of law, enforcement of the law, and so I felt really privileged and honored.
In the year 2000, ICJ-Kenya commissioned the publishing of a Freedom of Information Bill as part of its Freedom of Information project.
We were able to have a conference with the ICJ, which they facilitated, trying to originate the Freedom of Information Bill, and I participated in that. I further chaired, I think, a meeting which eventually led to the Media Council Act, and ICJ had a very positive input in that, in sensitizing members of parliament and other stakeholders from the media to ensure that the bill that eventually led to the act had the interests, addressed both the interests of the players as well as the government.
The bill was informed by a research study on the freedom of information in Kenya and other relevant jurisdictions.
ICJ understood our argument from a media standpoint that all these things that the legal fraternity talks about, they're talking to themselves. If the media doesn't understand it and the media needs to articulate it to the people, then ICJ is not doing anything. So we told ICJ, this organization wants to fill that gap so that the media can understand transitional justice processes. In turn, we can enhance the capacity of the media in the language we understand, because media mentality, you have to understand it from a media perspective, so that we can have gainful, meaningful change.
The project also involved a successful national campaign on the right to know. Through it, ICJ-Kenya managed to create links with national and international media houses and organizations advocating for freedom of information at the international level.
I was intrigued and impressed by ICJ because of the legal weight the organization commands in terms of unpacking legal issues, governance and democracy issues. But as I continued interacting with them, I told them, you guys almost speak to yourself. Do you believe the media understands what these laws are about? Do you believe the media understands the process to the ICC? You know, we started talking the ICC many years before Campo removed his Campo 6 list. And we started interacting with media. ICJ, I remember our very first main forum, media forum, that was credible enough, that was incorporated 5 countries from East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and Sudan. We did it because ICJ made it possible for us to hold it.
ICJ-Kenya has partnered with many organizations in its efforts to champion the rule of law.
Still, we don't have expertise in law, and so ICJ, as one of the partners that deal in that sector, has really been instrumental to the partnership, not only to TIRI but to other partners that are working in Kenya through this in this program. And the training that ICJ has supported has been very, very useful and instrumental.
It's around ensuring that internationally accepted standards of human rights are accepted, and ICJ has been a critical partner in this. Outside making sure that the freedom of information was accessed through the Constitution is now entrenched there.
It is not possible to practically carry out social audit on decentralized funds without access to freedom of information. So we continued our partnership with ICJ in sensitization and campaigns on freedom of information. Although it has not been enacted into law, we are still pursuing its entrenchment and sensitizing the communities on the need to access that information.
Because of the niche that ICJ has in certain areas and reaches what we are doing, so we borrow on ICJ. If we have a program that ICJ is best placed to deliver on, to facilitate on, then we invite ICJ to do that.
ICJ-Kenya still has a major role to play in promoting the rule of law and democratic governance.
And if you look at Article 43 on economic and social rights, this is a very new area, and it is now possible for citizens, for institutions to go before the courts and actually say that my right to water has been violated. And I think those are areas that together with ICJ we will all be able to work on, not only at the policy angle but also at the angle where it is justiciable, going before the court and actually articulating these issues.
Once Parliament passes a law establishing the Commission now becomes independent to pass now its own what's called subsidiary legislation to manage the elections. So ICJ will still play a very big role, because we as a Commission will start drafting those regulations and rules to help us manage the elections at all levels.
In the area of capacity building, we will always work together with ICJ-Kenya, particularly on the area of research training. When we bring in new officers, they will need to be trained, they will need to be acclimated with the situation. Those are the areas that we are going to interact more than in any other area.
The new constitution now provides that matters of economic and social rights can be brought to court, and so we'll see more delivery of service by, for example, local government that is responsive to the needs of the people, through the support we'll get from ICJ in pushing through one public interest litigation this year.
So as Kenya grows mature, democratically speaking, agencies like ICJ will have to play an even more prominent role to be part of that maturation, to deepen that culture of constitutionalism, democracy, and the rule of law.
We think that our role will be called upon to sensitize the public about the new laws that are being proposed, and also to bring in other civil society partners to be able to engage and criticize the bills, and to ensure that really that the implementation of the Constitution is followed to the letter.
ICJ-Kenya continues to have a positive impact upon the realization of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in the region.